Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Tokens, a podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek, your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter turned entrepreneur, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Now, let's get into it. Today's guest is Dermot O'Riordan, director at the POKT Network Foundation. POKT, or POKT, is a decentralized blockchain infrastructure network, also sometimes referred to as DePIN, that aims to help developers build blockchain-based applications with data. It also has a decentralized infrastructure layer that allows for interaction between apps and multiple blockchains. The network provides developers with a remote procedure call, or RPC, access to the internet, and it relays API requests for major blockchains and supports over 60 blockchains, and has had over 754 billion relays since its mainnet. This week alone, it saw 3.9 billion relays. In the past 24 hours, it had over 620 million relays. A lot of relays here. It effectively acts as an interface between the blockchain networks and its applications. And if you're lost, don't worry. We will get into it and you'll walk away from this episode more educated on the topic. With all that said, Dermot, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jacquelyn. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't really get into your background in the intro, talked a lot about POKT, but I know your journey into the Web3 space was interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you were doing before and how you landed in Web3?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess probably for some reason, like many in the crypto space, I've kind of worn many different hats in my career. Over the last 12 plus years, I've been a startup operator early on. I was actually a lawyer advising kind of high growth startups, as well as a lot of the bigger kind of global VCs that invest into them. I was on the board for a while of a global entrepreneurs network. And I guess once I kind of dove deep into the world of Web3, I ended up becoming, immediately before joining POKT Network, I was a partner at a $30 million seed stage fund. And so, I guess kind of some of the kind of think about it, I guess some of the kind of questions or threads that kind of run through my career have often been around how best to capitalize new emerging technologies, how best to govern them, and actually also how do you build, I guess, communities that bring these technologies to life and kind of, help them become sustainable and thrive and everything else. And I think if you're interested in these questions, I think crypto and Web3 is probably the most exciting place you could possibly be, because it's just such an open design space, kind of blank canvas for this. And I guess, I guess that's why I'm kind of excited to be here and kind of be part of the industry.
Yeah, amazing. And so why POKT specifically? Like, what did you see in the network, the team building it? And can you kind of explain in layman terms for our listeners all the things I said in the intro, but with RPCs and relays, et cetera, like what is really going on at POKT?
Yeah, I think, I guess my introduction to POKT was in 2019. I met the original founder, Michael O'Riordan. And at the time he was talking about, hey, we're building all of this value on blockchains. It's going to, power and custody all of this value. We're going to be using it to coordinate on the internet and build all these new businesses and industries. However, the access layer, it should be more decentralized because that will be more cost effective, scalable. And actually, we really don't want to build all this value and then actually to give all the power around the access layer back to kind of a few corporate giants. We've kind of created Web2 in a kind of just a different name. So, and at the time, this is, I guess, back 2018, 2019, before the kind of 2020 DeFi bull run, nobody was thinking about this. Nobody was really thinking about decentralized infrastructure either. And I guess that kind of really resonated with me. And actually, so I guess fast forward to the next year while I was at Eden Block, and our mission there was to back the builders of the new open internet. And I'd known Michael for a while and realized actually, wait a second, actually POKT could be a really exciting investment. I think not only are they solving a key problem, and actually at that time, the problem had only gotten, I guess, worse or more apparent. At the time, the main way that most typical users interact with blockchains, and particularly Ethereum, was in Infura. And there's been a few notable outages and people realize, actually, maybe just having one company kind of running all its own data centers to power this whole decentralized infrastructure, because people joke when you're in Infura, it doesn't work your MetaMask. Is Ethereum off? What's going on? So having a more distributed, resilient way to access that, it's, creates more uptime. And then you kind of layer on the idea that, we can actually create a more thoughtful governance model over this as well. So actually, it's not just a group of equity holders that decide the big decisions or whether it's anything as extreme as censoring to just what products we support and features and everything else. So creating a whole open infrastructure stack around this problem was kind of pretty important. And I guess for me, POKT was looking to solve that, but also having the thinking around the governance side of it as well. I guess thinking of like, how do we kind of make sure this is owned and governed by its users and not just kind of the capital, I guess, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to DePIN, I feel like that phrase has been tossed around a lot in the crypto world, especially just the need for infrastructure is so strong. How has it kind of evolved from like when you entered to now, and what role does community play in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I still think we haven't seen the full benefits of DePIN just yet. I think people are really excited by it because it's an evolution of what we've seen before. And I think you kind of go back to kind of early 2010s and the rise of these early sharing economy or network marketplace platforms like Airbnb and Uber and even Etsy and eBay. And they really showed the power of, okay, if we decentralized or open up our supply sides of our marketplace, our platforms, we can achieve these amazing cost and scale benefits. However, so DePINs are looking to build on that. So actually, by instead of having a traditional company doing the onboarding for the drivers of the property, we can actually use a blockchain as a single source of truth. And we can actually potentially onboard every existing infrastructure provider around the world for that particular service. So that can be, yes, there's no contracts, no bureaucracy, so it can compress costs even more. And I guess because using that similar model to Airbnb, because you don't own all of the infrastructure and property, you can scale to new markets more quickly. I think so. Yes, there is that extension and evolution, which is exciting. And I guess that you mentioned around the governance piece, but I think what we haven't seen yet, and it's something we're really thinking deeply about POKT, is actually a lot of the promise and excitement around, say, using blockchain for any kind of these platforms is actually having demand side decentralization as well. And actually, that's the idea of, instead of just using that same analogy of Airbnb and Uber, where there's one app to access all those drivers or all those properties. Right. If we use a protocol, we can actually have hundreds of apps or thousands of apps that can be catered for any particular market segment, cultural disposition, region, or taste, and they can all share the same access to that underlying infrastructure. So I think that's one of the real promises of DePIN, because we have protocols that can connect all of these kind of people within a big network. We can then actually have really interesting innovation. And actually, because you don't need to incentivize all the drivers or the properties to join your network, you don't have to build out that same underlying infrastructure. You can build on top. So you can innovate around, how you support your customers, maybe your pricing model, maybe you just have a great distribution network. You've got a really cool brand. So I think that kind of brings in some really cool innovation. I think it should also lead to really helpful competition at the kind of end user layer, but actually while still you're kind of collaborating on the underlying infrastructure as well. So I think you get these really unique kind of, I guess you kind of sometimes call it co-opetition benefits, where you're both collaborating, but you're also competing, and kind of it creates a net win for everyone. And I guess, like what we like to talk about at POKT is we're trying to create this healthier open internet. So making sure we're creating a more open economy for infrastructure and making sure the incentives are kind of organized in the right way to enable that as well.
Where do you see the demand for something like this? Because when you were just talking right now, I was thinking about like the situation with Ticketmaster and how for a lot of people, it's the only route you could really go to buy tickets. And so many people are frustrated by it, the fees, everything. It's like a monopoly on it, the whole Taylor Swift era of things where it was impossible to buy tickets and the resale on them was just insane. So I could see like the demand on that side. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about like Uber and other marketplaces like that, where it is decentralized in a way or Airbnb, because they have like individual operators, but they're still under the same roof. Do you think these types of businesses want something like this, or would that kind of mess with their model?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they absolutely don't want this. I think.
So how do we make them want it? Yeah.
Well, I think initially, at least those, they don't initially, but actually, I think the benefit of DePINs and how we actually win is by giving them something that they do want. And I guess going back to that kind of demand side innovation piece, I think it's easier when you think about DePINs largely are powering some kind of digital service. So it's usually It could be internet, it could be storage. In Pocket's case, it's RPC to access any open data source, any blockchain, and so on and so forth. And if you really think about it, a lot of those existing businesses or platforms, they do have the underlying infrastructure, but actually what they've got really good at to get to their position is like they're excellent customer service, they're excellent at business development, they're excellent at marketing. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to compute, that's actually pretty commoditized. So actually DePINs can provide them with a scalable, lower cost backend. And I think that's where the magic happens, where you have these decentralized networks, which are, decentralization, no matter what way you interact with it, is going to be more difficult than in a traditional business, because to be trustless and decentralized, you're likely going to have to use some kind of a token. So I think the role that DePINs play is actually taking on a more B2B role. So at Pocket, we do have this access to, we have these 15,000 infrastructure providers all around the world. But a realization came out through Pocket after we launched in 2020 was, end users don't want to pay for this decentralization. So we don't compete directly with Vera or Alchemy. We actually do our best and make our setup, our kind of technology and our economics really business friendly to them. So then they can use Pocket's infrastructure to serve their customers better. So they get the cost benefits, the scalability benefits, and they can even actually maybe get some governance power in this new network as well. So I think we cater for the existing businesses just through sheer economics, user experience, making them feel welcome. And I think the cool thing about that is you can also enable these new businesses that never would have existed before, because no new business could, without the massive capital up front, build a new Airbnb or Uber. Similarly, they can never build a new Amazon Web Services. They couldn't access Amazon's data centers. And yet there's all these data center businesses around the world. So if we can connect and aggregate all of this compute and infrastructure into a network, we can enable just all of these entrepreneurs around the world who actually, they really care about that digital service. They really care about that particular market. So they can monetize that. And I think that's kind of a really nice, interesting synergy. So the protocols keep the cost as low as possible, but there's still a margin opportunity because people still care about convenience. They still care about having someone to email, to call, to get value-added features. And then when it comes to a lot of these compute services, they're often just commodities. They're things you just need. So I think there's a hell of a lot of innovation that can happen when we build our kind of networks like this. But I think the key thing is not just to have the one access point. I think that's what is the mistake. If you kind of have, if it's just Pocket.network is the only way to access RPC through Pocket, I think that would be a losing strategy, just because it's pretty unlikely we can build out all this infrastructure, keep this community happy, and then also be the best sales team in the world. I think we're much better at actually encouraging the best sales teams in the world to come to Pocket and build their business on top.
Got it. Okay. And what are the conversations like when you talk to these sales teams or providers, both in Web3 and outside of Web3? Like, what are they thinking when it comes to this? Do they feel a need for it, or you have to like really educate them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's been a journey, because actually going back to, so Pocket initially had one of these businesses built on top. We had our second launch in October last year, and we should have, I think, 5 by the end of this week. So it's slowly growing, and these conversations have been going on for a while. And initially they were kind of skeptical because, one, they didn't see the technology or how we're making it easy for them. So then we built out the technology to make it really clear to them. And actually, I have this line when I sometimes talk about it of, I think a lot of crypto businesses and where they fall down is they speak to degens that may be running these kind of traditional enterprise businesses in crypto, and they kind of think, oh yeah, you're trading on the side. I can speak to you like this. You'll just use my business, right? You'll use my decentralized infrastructure. But I think I had this line where I said, even if you're a degen in the streets, there's most likely to be some kind of accountant in your firm that's kind of a neat freak in the spreadsheets. So you need to appeal to them too. You need to make it really predictable, really easy to use, really transparent. Again, the technology to can integrate needs to be easy to maintain and adapt. So I think you need to be really thoughtful about this. And so these conversations, a lot of it has been around, okay, but I don't want to just pay in your token that could go up 10x one day, down 50% the next day. That's like, I can't build a business on that. So I think predictable pricing has been important. So actually in Pocket, we actually do have USD based pricing, but then that locks in, that is then paid in Pocket. So that locks in, for example, in Pocket's case, you may be a major DeFi application and you're like, okay, I've got 100 million requests on Ethereum and Base and Arbitrum per day I need. So you can actually calculate that, and then you can buy the pocket and you can stake it. And that kind of, we can actually help you understand, okay, you want to pay every month. So that should, based on your rough usage, you can buy that and stake it for, that should last you 30 days. And if your kind of usage goes up, we can give you notifications to let you know, hey, you need to top up. So we're trying to give you the best experience we can. I think as a business, you are still this kind of wholesale layer. So you are going through a little bit more of the painful UX on behalf of your users, but then you get the lower costs. But then for the end users, they get the benefit of decentralized infrastructure under the hood. They don't want to touch this. They don't need to know about it. They just get the benefits of hopefully maybe lower costs or whatever the benefits that kind of business that's kind of connecting to that infrastructure is providing to them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, as an end user for a lot of things, I don't need to know how it worked. I just need it to work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly the point, because a lot of this stuff, it just needs to work. And you don't notice that it doesn't work like your electricity or your internet until it stops working.
It stops, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. When it comes to the networks that you support, I saw on a database that Polygon, Ethereum, and Solana are currently the biggest chains. What do you think is driving that? Is it like users, developers on those chains, or something else?
Yeah. I think it's a combination. So because really our core customers are these kind of RPC businesses themselves. So it's a connection to some of the applications and customers they have. But usually there's pretty strong correlation with where the most users are, because actually that's what you need for RPC requests. And RPC requests, I know we didn't fully unpack it. Really, it's just how you interact with any blockchain. It's how you send a transaction. It's how you read the data. So as more and more users are using that blockchain or rollup, demand will go up. And usually that means there's more demand for RPC. So kind of growth starts to spike. I think you'll see on Pocket's current listed chains, I think it's mostly EVM based, and it was Ethereum. Polygon seems to be rising, but actually Solana has had a major rise in the last 6 months. And I think that's definitely correlated with the rise in people using Solana too. So there's definitely a strong correlation with that. And I think as we onboard more and more of these businesses, I think you'll get to an interesting place where Pocket can be kind of an interesting index of blockchain activity more broadly, because the idea is we can actually support every network. So why wouldn't every RPC business use us for at least some of their traffic? And then I think you'll start to see, maybe as RPC kind of demand on certain networks pop up, you might be starting to realize, oh, this is actually a blockchain I should maybe pay more interest to. Maybe there's more users here. And if you kind of look through the data for Pocket, I think you'll see that with Base really starting to increase. I think it's starting to increase maybe even over Arbitrum and so on and so forth. And actually that probably predated some of the stories and kind of new stories that people are talking about some of these trends as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, which blockchains do you think are, underdogs or up and coming based off the data that you see?
Yeah, interesting. I think I have to look back. I haven't looked at it as recently. I think I definitely did spot. I mean, everyone saw Solana, I guess, and it kind of was interesting seeing it kind of pop up. Base was definitely one that we knew could be important, but it surprised me how quickly it kind of. I think it did flip Arbitrum for a number of users and daily transactions, and I was surprised when you saw that growing as much. I think it's also interesting that sometimes you think Polygon is dead or nobody's talking about it, but actually there seems to be huge demand for it. So actually, and when you look around at some of the bigger applications, you can see there's a lot happening on Polygon. I think lots kind of popping off on Near as well, different dApps and games. So it's, I think it's definitely something cool. If you do want to play around with that, you can go to, I think it's pocketscan.com as our main explorer, where you can kind of see what chains are hot and what's happening really.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of demand, an argument I hear pretty frequently as a former reporter is that a lot of these DePIN protocols just haven't found sustainable demand yet. That's not really necessarily Pocket's fault, right? But how do you kind of see them positioning themselves in the market and actually finding traction? Like, what needs to happen there?
Yeah, I think this is the exact issue. And for me, it has to be at scale from here. I think to get to the start line as a DePIN, you do need to build out this protocol, incentivize this community, get your economics right, think about your governance, all of this stuff that you don't have to do as a traditional company. But I don't think there's been enough people focused on end users and demand and really thinking about what are their needs, right? So like being much more user-centric And I think it goes to what I was talking about earlier of you really need to think about what your customers need, what their problems are. And I think part of the answer is enabling other businesses to do it for you. Maybe you're the founder who had the great idea to build out this protocol. Maybe you have this amazing community, this amazing technology, but assuming that you're also the best person to sell it to everyone, I think is a mistake. And I guess maybe a controversial opinion here, which is holding down some of the teams, is actually I think some of the teams are conflicted because actually a lot of the teams have raised for both equity and tokens. And so I think the pitch to investors, and I've been on the other side of this pitch back in the day, was, hey, we have this protocol. And I actually always used to hate it because I think you need to lean into your business model. Was we have this protocol and token can capture value through usage, and we onboard all of this network of infrastructure providers, but we can also build a business on top. And as we're the first, we can be the first or one of the main businesses on top. And I think if you push that too hard, no one else will join your network because they feel they're going to get special access, special privileges. Maybe they have a head start. Maybe they have just better knowledge of how to use the infrastructure. So you're always going to be losing. So I think definitely the conflicts are probably holding some people back, whether they realize it or not. Even if these networks are permissionless and anyone can integrate, you need to do a lot more to enable people to connect. So I think that's part of the story. And I think simple pricing, much more convenience, realizing that decentralization doesn't sell. It's the other benefits that decentralization brings. And that's kind of usually cost and scale elements being two big ones. And then of course the resilience piece too.
Yeah. On the notion about tokens, what do you think would be the best route forward for these projects? Like they should just go token route, equity route. Sounds like the combination isn't necessarily the most receptive.
I do think to build out something that's truly decentralized and trustless, the token is the kind of the value capture method and best way to achieve that. But I agree. You have to be really careful. I think you want basically many equity businesses to build on top of you. I think that is the dream. I think they call it the true platforms I think they create 10 times more value than they capture. So if you have a $1 billion network, ideally you have $10 billion of value that are built on top of you because they're actually also kind of great. I think that kind of creates a really sustainable platform. So it's thinking through that, kind of not looking to do everything yourself, leaving opportunities for others to build that, to monetize that, to create some margin opportunities, and just staying in your lane somewhat. And I think everyone gets excited, and often I think classic engineers is to try and build everything, solve all the problems. But I think there's a lot of power from being really focused on what you're best at, and then partnering with others who are best in class to bring that to your ecosystem. I think that's also a big distinguishing factor between Web3 and Web2. And sometimes I think people forget that is we're meant to enable all of this amazing open source collaboration, yet sometimes a lot of projects can be closed source for too long. They don't really kind of enable that collaboration. I think your culture is really important. Is it welcoming? How helpful are you? How are you rewarding that? So I think that there's a few elements. There's no simple answers to any of this, but I think often it comes back to, the kind of culture you're building around your project too.
Yeah. For Pocket, is that what you envision kind of in the long term or even near term, like creating that ecosystem that is billions of dollars worth on top of what the network is?
Yeah, that's the dream. And that's the complete, and also partly a reality, I guess. It's still early days, but I think there are at least 3, but maybe 4 or 5 businesses that have raised venture funding based on their connection or head start by building on Pocket, whether that's kind of the validator infrastructure business, the RPC businesses they've built. And we want to see many, many more of those kind of types of projects. And I guess for all types of different elements of that as well. And I guess at Pocket, we do think a lot about our community. I think particularly in the world of open source, I think your ability to get people to collaborate, support, that's the real distinguishing factor, and I think can be the real point of difference for a lot of these successful projects. So we do think about that a lot. We have some good ideas. I think it's related to some of the ways that we kind of design our governance, but we don't have all the answers just yet because I think it's evolving. But we're certainly doing our best to kind of enable that and be really thoughtful about it too.
Mm-hmm. In April, POKT Network also added 3 more gateways to its platform, bringing its total to 6. For our listeners who have no idea what that means, can you explain why that matters and what it means for the development of the network?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, gateways are how Pocket scales. So these are the traditional businesses that are abstracting away the kind of complexities of dealing with the actual protocol and the infrastructure and the nodes and the Pocket token to give their end users a really slick, easy, like Web 2 like experience. Sometimes we call this the DePIN mullet. So you have a clean faced, fresh faced person on the front that you're happy to deal with, and then you got the mullet on the back. And that's maybe not for everyone, but that's kind of the rocking decentralized infrastructure that's kind of keeping it resilient, powering the kind of the cost-effective, scalable infrastructure. And that's what these gateways bring. So they often bring they bring their whole network, right? They can bring more customers. They can bring they can be based in different regions, so they might know certain languages, maybe know certain kind of segments of different markets. And I think the cool thing about what we're doing with gateways is they can be a mixture of existing RPC businesses. So we have ChainStack as a good example, one of the bigger RPC businesses in the blockchain space, as well as Liquify on top of Grove and Liquify around already. But then we're also minting new entrepreneurs, so to speak, because we have two of the onboarding gateways are actually existing blockchain developer communities that didn't have any real business model to monetize their community apart from kind of doing traditional consulting. And so Raid Guild, a really kind of longstanding Web3 collective that have been providing, I guess they've been providing like technical consulting and services, building out like a dev shop for lots of different big projects. Now they're now building an RPC business on Pocket that launches on Friday. And actually they realized, hey, we have this network. We understand the core service, and actually all of our customers need it, and the people we interact with, we can monetize that by building a business, kind of a thin interface on top. And similarly with Developer DAO, which is kind of one of the big developer focused communities in the space, they're building a gateway business on Pocket. So we're really excited because of this. Yeah, it's how we scale. It's how we bring more demand to Pocket. It grows protocol revenue, but also it gives end users more options as well. So maybe they care about dealing with certain kind of projects or platforms. Maybe they care about certain support, certain kind of types of pricing. And with more gateways, they just have more options and they can still benefit from everything that Pocket provides on the back end too.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. When it comes to Pocket Network, what are some differentiating factors compared to other competitors that really kind of drives people to work with you opposed to them?
Yeah, great question. I think we are pioneering this gateway-led approach. I think that definitely helps. I think most other DePINs are still they have a token, they have a decentralized supply side, but likely don't have a decentralized demand side yet, at least. So really encouraging the growth of all these other new gateways and businesses on top. I also think we have tried to pioneer on the governance side as well. So it's not one token, one vote in Pocket. Actually, we're based on impact and skin in the game. So if you come to Pocket and our ecosystem, whoever you are, don't have to have any existing reputation. If you do something of value, you can get some governance power. You can maybe build something that's useful. You don't have to be technical either. Maybe you end up providing great educational content, hosting some community calls. We can actually have pathways to get you some governance power so you can actually have a real say and influence how decisions are made. And so I guess that brings it back to kind of that community element of just, we want to have the, I guess, most knowledgeable, engaged people working with us, and anyone who has talents to bring to the fore, we want to try and provide a space for them. Admittedly, decentralized RPC doesn't suit everyone, but ideally, eventually we'll find a space for anyone, whatever skills they can bring to the table. So I guess, yeah, probably the community and the governance, and then our gateway strategy are kind of probably key differentiating factors to a lot of the other teams that are probably quite similar to us. Okay.
If you guys are listening in and you feel like you relate to that, reach out. On that note, on the future of DePIN, I'm really curious, where do you see it going, let's say in the near term, in the next 6 to 12 months, and then like long term? What types of use cases do you expect to kind of evolve on maybe the Web3 side first, and then we could talk about other areas?
Yeah, I think we do need to get a few things right for sure, but I think all of the surrounding infrastructure is now largely ready, as well as a lot of the surrounding knowledge. So I think we're going to start to see an explosion in growth in demand for these networks. Certain of these digital services are constrained by supply. So actually having a DePIN network to be able to aggregate all of that existing supply into one network can really help with costs. I think there's examples. I guess he said not to mention Web3, but actually, or said not to mention Web2 or Web3, but actually I think thinking about training up AI models done correctly with the right efficient protocol, I think that's a great use case. I think there's some cool things happening with starting with bandwidth and internet. How do we scale that to more areas that currently doesn't have as great coverage, give people more options? I think there's some cool things with mapping as well. Again, that's difficult to get right, but the idea that these maps can be updated more frequently if you get the kind of the right network right. But yeah, going back to the basics again of just providing more compute to whoever needs it, more storage, and just ensuring it gets into the hands of the right people. I think this compresses the costs for entrepreneurs because these are largely B2B networks. So I think the real benefits come from, just like I guess we had like the AWS moment for a lot of startups. That means you didn't have to be an expert in running all of the data centers and the servers yourself. I think we can, yes, we're not having that same quantum leap, but we can dramatically reduce costs up to 90% in some cases. And I think if we do adopt some of these DePIN techniques, the end users don't have to care about what's happening on the back end. And so that's when I think we start to see all of these networks really start to scale. And I think the endpoint for this is, I think most of the major kind of compute kind of powered digital services can leverage these networks in the back end. They can be modular, you can pull into them, but so this can actually power huge amounts of value. And I guess really we're talking trillions of dollars of market cap in terms of all these markets that they're tailoring. And it just really needs the end user focused story to kind of make it comfortable, make it convenient, make it predictable. And you can really start to see these networks to scale as well.
Amazing. What do you think is the timeline for that?
I think to be real, I think to see the major blow off point, I think probably a couple of years, but I think we'll start to see some exciting growth in the next 6 to 12 months for sure. Certainly we're excited about that at Pocket, but then we look across the space and I think we're seeing everyone has been way more sophisticated in terms of how they think about onboarding partners, thinking about demand, making it more friendly. I think, as we were mentioning earlier, those conversations that people have been having with those end users, they're much more frequent now, and they're getting much deeper, and people are understanding their needs and how they can get the best out of these new networks too.
Cool, amazing. I don't think I asked you this before, but kind of to wrap things up, what else is on the main roadmap for Pocket this year? Kind of playing into that 6 to 12 months. Where do you see the growth for your network?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things happening at Pocket. I mentioned economics are an important area to get right. I also think there's a really exciting design space. So we are looking to continue to improve and refine our economics. We're also thinking about introducing an incentive for the creators of the data sources that our infrastructure providers host to give them some revenue share too. So actually that could be any blockchain, it could be any index of a particular important data source. You'll actually start to get a revenue share from all the usage going through Pocket. So I think that's a great open source kind of innovative new business model for people. I think that's going to be exciting. We're also making it way easier for anyone who's running infrastructure for any network that Pocket cares about. You're an Ethereum solo staker, you run nodes for Solana or any other network. We're going to make it really, I guess, a no-brainer almost for you to bring your infrastructure to Pocket. We want you to be able to get additional revenue, make that really predictable, transparent, and super easy. So that's all going to be really helpful. And yeah, I think we're continuing to scale that gateway journey. So we're kind of at capacity right now. And I think that kind of all leads up to the major Shannon upgrade we're launching, which hopefully will be kind of end of summer. And it's named after Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, for any of those who are kind of computer science nerds out there. And that will just really make the network kind of infinitely scalable. So it kind of removes all the caps. Anyone can build a gateway. It's going to be a much easier tech stack to work with, to build on. And all of these kind of upgrades we can make them much quicker. And I guess enable a lot more kind of make Pocket Stack more modular. So we can also, instead of having to build a lot of things within our existing community, we can tap into a lot of the other best in class infrastructure that's out there. So Pocket will become much more interoperable with Celestia, the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem, but also through IBC to kind of the rest of the EVM networks too. So I think that's all going to be helpful for governance, for end user services, and everything else.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm excited to keep up with that. And maybe once the Shannon upgrade's done, we could have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love that.
Yeah. So for the final two questions, I always ask all my guests this. First one is, what else are you watching in crypto right now outside of your sector that you think people should pay attention to?
Yeah, that's a great one. I guess it's probably twofold. I'm always interested in DeFi, and actually, I guess I've just having these native digital payment rails is super important and exciting. But frankly, I've been pretty unimpressed and bored over the last couple of years. So I'm really excited and hopeful to see some kind of big innovations, kind of some real 0 to 1 innovations happening on that in the kind of the coming years, the coming months even. And then the other area, I guess, naturally, I kind of mentioned it before, but I think DAOs are going to be a real game changer. Yes, for protocols, but they're a native way for people to coordinate better together on the internet. And I think that's can unlock massive amounts of value and innovation. And I think we could see some really cool businesses, whether or not they're decentralized underneath or not, by just having more people sharing ideas, building these kind of digital collectives, building businesses, creating value in different ways, connecting and collaborating. I think that's going to be a really cool story and a really important one for crypto. I think that combines with the native payment rails and also the native kind of infrastructure we're building on crypto. So I think DAOs are obviously going to be really important for all of the infrastructure we build to be sustainable and owned by its core users and governed by them as well. But yeah, I'm keen to see some breakout projects and breakout DAOs in many different areas. I guess as an aside, there's always a funny one that I like to mention of called Hair DAO. I don't know if you've come across that one before.
No. What is it?
It's a silly name, but it's actually, they got some serious research there. It's actually a bunch of people who are providing data to help research into hair loss in men. And they've actually had a recent scientific paper produced based on some of the research, like just because they've created this collective, they created a DAO, people are providing the right information, they can get rewarded, they can get more upside in the kind of the commercializing of the IP. It's kind of like a funny, like small example of just of the many possibilities you have when you kind of create a community that can collaborate, connect, and find ways to distribute value back to those people. But while also not making sure it's not too overly financialized as well, because I think that can be a real issue for sure.
No, 100%. I feel like DAOs, sometimes people are like intimidated by the acronym and what it stands for and everything, and the fact that it's in Web3, but it could be as simple as that for hair loss.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Okay, my last question for you is if you can leave us with a piece of advice, maybe something that you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry.
Yeah, great question. I would say, and it's definitely not something I can always hold myself to, but it's something I always think about and want to do better. And that's actually just taking the moment to breathe and kind of really think longer. And I think long-term thinking is a real edge in this space. I think most of the people in the crypto industry have major short-term kind of time horizons from projects they support, who we laud as heroes and so on and so forth, why they should spend their money or their time on different projects. So I think it's really helpful to kind of look further ahead to where things are going, what this means, if this is sustainable, if this is fleeting, because that can avoid you wasting your time, your money. I think it also leads to better outcomes, because I think it's amazing that we do have these open, financial rails that are kind of fully programmatic and 24/7, but it can really tire people out, and it isn't always great for early stage projects. So the more you can kind of keep your eye on the prize on what matters to you and what matters to your project, to your community, I think the more likely you're going to achieve bigger and better outcomes. So I guess something we always try to think about, I think particularly prices or lagging metrics, is what is going to be the kind of the big kind of high leverage moments for you, what's really going to move the needle, thinking 6 to 12 months out and not just kind of being super reactive. Because I think a lot of this industry can sometimes over-index on trends because they weren't thinking about them before they came around. So we often find a very reactionary industry, which isn't necessarily very good for building long-term value.
Yep. Sit on your hands. That's what I like to say. Just breathe, wait. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Dermot, thank you for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. It's been great. Yeah, I'd love to come back another time. Thank you.
100%.